I knew something was wrong when I saw Deborah Montgomery standing at my barn door with a clipboard on that crisp September morning, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the board like she owned the place. "Good morning, Roger," she called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I need to discuss something important with you." I set down the feed bucket I'd been carrying to the chicken coop and wiped my hands on my jeans. My property sat on the edge of what had become a sprawling HOA community outside of Lexington, Kentucky, and Deborah had been the association president for the past 3 years. In that time, she'd made it her personal mission to bring every property within a 5-mile radius under her control. "Morning, Deborah. What can I help you with?" She adjusted her sunglasses and pushed them up into her blonde hair, revealing eyes that reminded me of a hawk sizing up prey. "The association just purchased a commercial-grade leaf mulcher for the community. We need somewhere to store it during the fall season, and your barn would be perfect." I glanced back at the red structure behind me. The barn had been on this land for over 100 years, built by my great-great-grandfather when he first settled here. "I don't think so, Deborah. I use that barn for my equipment and storage." "Oh, come now," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I've seen inside. You have plenty of room. This is about being a good neighbor and contributing to the community." "My barn isn't part of the community." Her smile tightened. "Your property borders our development. We've been very accommodating about your refusal to join the association. The least you could do is help us out with this small favor." I should have said no right then and there. Should have told her to take her mulcher and find somewhere else to store it. But I'd been raised to be helpful, and part of me thought maybe if I did this one thing, she'd finally leave me alone about joining her HOA. "How long are we talking about?" I asked. "Just through the fall season." "September through November, maybe early December. We'll move it out before winter really hits. And you'll make sure whoever uses it returns it clean and in the same condition." "Absolutely." She smiled wider, sensing victory. "The association takes excellent care of all its equipment." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Deborah practically skipped back to her Mercedes SUV, already on her phone before she'd even closed the door. I watched her drive away and felt that familiar knot of unease in my stomach that always appeared after dealing with her. The next day, a flatbed truck arrived with the leaf mulcher. It was bigger than I'd expected. A massive orange and black machine that looked like it could chew through a small tree. 2 men from the HOA's landscaping crew unloaded it and positioned it in the back corner of my barn, right next to where I kept my tractor supplies. "Thanks for letting us store this here," one of the men said. He was younger, maybe mid-20s, with a tired look in his eyes. "Mrs. Montgomery wanted to put it behind the community center, but the town said it was a fire hazard." "Fire hazard?" "Yeah, these things run on gasoline and the fuel tank holds about 50 gallons. Can't store it too close to occupied buildings without proper permits." He shrugged. "But I guess out here, it doesn't matter as much." After they left, I stood in the barn doorway and stared at the mulcher. Something about what the worker had said bothered me, but I pushed the thought aside. Deborah had assured me it would only be here temporarily, and then things would go back to normal. The first few weeks went smoothly enough. Crews would come by early in the morning, load up the mulcher onto their trailer and return it by evening. They were generally respectful, always closed the barn door behind them, and for the most part stayed out of my way. Then October arrived, and with it, the complaints started. I was in the house one afternoon when I heard someone knocking loudly on my front door. I opened it to find a red-faced man in his 60s wearing a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on it. "Are you Roger Ingram?" he demanded. "That's right. Who are you?" "Dale Patterson." I'm on the HOA board. We have a problem with the mulcher. What kind of problem? It's not available when we need it. We send crews here to pick it up, and half the time you're not around to open the barn. I felt my jaw tighten. I wasn't told I needed to be on call for this. Deborah said you'd pick it up and return it. Nobody said anything about me having to be here. Well, we need access during working hours. The crews can't waste time waiting around for you to show up. Then maybe you should have stored it somewhere with regular access, I said, trying to keep my voice level. This is my property, and I'm not running a storage facility. Dale's face grew redder. You agreed to help the community. The least you can do is be cooperative about it. I am being cooperative, but I have my own work to do, my own life to live. I can't just sit here waiting for your crews all day. He jabbed a finger toward me. This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that makes us wish you'd just sell your property and move somewhere else. You're in the middle of our community, dragging down property values with your chickens and your old barn, and your refusal to maintain proper landscaping standards. I'm not in your community, I said, my patience wearing thin. My property is my own, and it's been in my family for 5 generations. I don't answer to your HOA. We'll see about that. Dale turned and stomped back to his truck, spraying gravel as he peeled out of my driveway. That night, I couldn't sleep. The confrontation had stirred up all the anxiety I'd been feeling since Deborah first approached me. I'd lived on this property my whole life, inherited it from my father, who'd inherited it from his father. The land had been in the Ingram family since the 1800s, a 10-acre parcel that had somehow survived as the surrounding farmland was carved up and sold to developers. The next morning, I found a note taped to my barn door. It was from Deborah, written in her precise, looping handwriting. Roger, the HOA board has decided that, for the convenience of our maintenance staff, we need 24-hour access to the barn. We'll be installing a key lock on the door. Someone will be by Thursday to handle the installation. Thank you for your cooperation. I crumpled the note in my fist. They wanted to install their own lock on my barn, on my property. Without even asking me first, I immediately called the number on the HOA letterhead. A receptionist answered, and I asked to speak with Deborah. Mrs. Montgomery is in a board meeting right now, the receptionist said. Can I take a message? Tell her Roger Ingram called, and under no circumstances is anyone from the HOA to install any locks or make any modifications to my barn. If anyone shows up to do so, I'll consider it trespassing. I'll relay the message, sir. Thursday came and went without anyone attempting to install a lock. I thought maybe my message had gotten through, that they'd finally respect my boundaries. But Friday afternoon, I returned from a supply run in town to find the barn door wide open and a locksmith's van parked outside. I parked my truck fast and jogged over to the barn. Inside, a man in coveralls was drilling into the barn door frame, installing a heavy-duty combination lock. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" I shouted. The locksmith looked up, startled. "I'm just doing the job I was hired for, man." The HOA called and said to install this lock on my property without my permission. His face went pale. They said they owned the barn. They lied. Stop what you're doing right now. He immediately set down his drill. "Look, I don't want any trouble. They already paid me, but I can reverse the installation and refund half the fee. Do it." While he worked to remove the partially installed lock, I called Deborah's cell phone. She answered on the third ring, and I could hear chatter and clinking glasses in the background. "Roger, this really isn't a good time. You tried to install a lock on my barn without permission. That's illegal, Deborah." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. We simply need reliable access to our equipment. Since you've been so difficult about being available, we had to take alternative measures. Alternative measures. You tried to alter my property without consent. That's criminal trespass and vandalism. She laughed, actually laughed. Vandalism. We're improving your decrepit old barn. You should be thanking us. Get your mulcher out of my barn by Sunday night, or I'll have it removed myself and you can pay the storage and towing fees. You can't do that. We have an agreement. An agreement that you violated when you tried to install your own lock. Sunday night, Deborah. I'm done with this. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with anger. The locksmith finished removing the hardware and apologized again before leaving. I stood in the barn, looking at the mulcher sitting in the corner like an unwelcome guest that had overstayed its welcome. Saturday passed quietly, and I began to think maybe Deborah would actually honor my demand. But Sunday morning, I woke to find my barn door open again and the mulcher gone. Good, I thought. They'd finally listened. Then I walked outside and saw what they'd done to my property. Someone had driven the mulcher across my front yard during the night, leaving deep ruts in the grass. They'd also apparently run it, because there were shredded leaves and debris scattered across a 20-foot radius. But worse than that, they'd knocked over my chicken coop fence, and 3 of my hens were missing. I spent 2 hours rounding up the remaining chickens and repairing the fence. The 3 missing hens never turned up. I found feathers scattered near the tree line, and suspected a fox or coyote had gotten them after they'd been let loose. By noon, I was furious enough to drive to the HOA office myself. It was closed on Sundays, but I had Deborah's home address from the county property records. She lived in the heart of the development, in a massive brick colonial with perfectly manicured landscaping and a fountain in the front yard. I rang the doorbell 3 times before she answered, wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of wine despite it being barely past lunch. "Roger, what on earth are you doing here? This is my private residence. Your crew destroyed my yard and killed my chickens. I have no idea what you're talking about. The mulcher. Someone drove it across my property last night, tore up everything, and let my chickens loose. 3 of them are dead." She waved her hand dismissively. "I didn't authorize anyone to move the mulcher. If one of the crew members did something negligent, take it up with the landscaping company. You're the HOA president. You're responsible. Actually, the HOA is a separate legal entity. Any liability would fall on the association, not on me personally." She smiled that cold smile again. "And our insurance would cover any legitimate claims, though I doubt a few chickens are worth much. Those chickens weren't worth much to you, but they were mine, and my property deserves respect." "Your property." She said it like the words tasted bad. "Your ramshackle farm sitting in the middle of our beautiful community. Do you know how many potential homebuyers we've lost because of your eyesore? How much money your presence has cost the homeowners in this development?" "That's not my problem." "It will be." Her eyes narrowed. "The HOA board has been discussing our options regarding your property. We've consulted with lawyers. There are ways to force non-compliant properties into compliance, especially when they impact the community's well-being." "I'm not part of your community." "You're surrounded by our community. That makes you part of it whether you like it or not." She started to close the door. "I suggest you consider joining the association voluntarily, Roger. The alternative could be much less pleasant." The door clicked shut in my face. I stood there for a long moment, trying to process what felt like a direct threat. Then I walked back to my truck and sat in the cab, staring at her perfect house in her perfect neighborhood. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about what Deborah had said, about the HOA consulting lawyers and forcing compliance. Could they actually do that? My property had been in my family for generations, completely separate from the HOA that had been established only 15 years ago when the development was built. Monday morning, I called a real estate attorney in downtown Lexington. His name was Robert Fitzgerald, and he'd been recommended by a friend who'd had his own property dispute years ago. "Mr. Ingram," he said after I'd explained the situation, "the first thing we need to establish is whether your property is actually subject to any HOA covenants or restrictions. Do you have your property deed? It's in my file cabinet at home. My father gave it to me when he passed the property to me. I'd like you to bring it in. Also, any surveys, title documents, or historical records you have about the property. The age of your land might actually work in your favor here." I spent Monday afternoon digging through old files in my office. My father had been meticulous about keeping records, and I found not just the deed but also surveys going back to the 1920s, old tax records, and even some handwritten documents from the original land grant in the 1850s. Tuesday morning, I spread everything out on Mr. Fitzgerald's conference table. He put on reading glasses and began going through the documents carefully, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. After about 30 minutes, he looked up with a slight smile. "Mr. Ingram, do you know what you have here? Old family documents. You have an original land patent signed by the governor of Kentucky in 1854. This document predates not just the HOA, but the entire concept of modern property development in this area." He tapped the yellowed paper gently. "This is a clear chain of title going back almost 200 years, with no breaks, no sales to outside parties, and most importantly, no covenant agreements. What does that mean practically? It means the HOA has absolutely no authority over your property. None. Your land was established and deeded long before any modern property restrictions existed in this area. Furthermore, because it's remained in continuous family ownership, no one ever had the opportunity to attach HOA covenants to it." He shuffled through more papers. "These surveys show your property boundaries quite clearly, and none of the HOA development encroaches on your land. You're completely separate." Relief flooded through me. "So they can't force me to join or comply with their rules, correct? However," he held up a finger, "that doesn't mean they won't try to cause problems. HOAs can be remarkably creative when they want to pressure someone. I'd suggest documenting everything, keeping detailed records of any interactions, and not agreeing to anything else without consulting me first." "Like storing their equipment?" "Exactly like that. Speaking of which, is the mulcher still on your property?" "No, they took it." "Good. I'd recommend you send a formal letter to the HOA, copied to their legal counsel if they have one, making it clear that they are not to use your property for any purpose without express written permission. I can draft that for you." I left his office feeling better than I had in weeks. The weight of worry that had been pressing down on me lifted, replaced by a sense of vindication. My family's land was mine, fully and legally, and there was nothing Deborah Montgomery or her HOA could do about it. Mr. Fitzgerald sent the letter on Wednesday. By Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Deborah, and she sounded nothing like her usual composed self. "What is the meaning of this letter?" she demanded. "You're threatening legal action. I'm establishing clear boundaries. Your organization does not have authority over my property. We'll see what our lawyers say about that. I hope you do consult them. My attorney has reviewed all my property documents, including the original land patent from 1854. Your HOA has no standing." There was a long silence on the other end. "You have the original patent." "I do, along with continuous chain of title documentation." My property is completely separate from your association, legally and historically. This isn't over, Roger. But her voice had lost its edge, replaced with something that sounded almost like uncertainty. Yes, Deborah, it is. Stay off my property. I hung up and permitted myself a small moment of satisfaction. Maybe now they'd finally leave me alone. I should have known better. Friday evening, I was feeding the chickens when I noticed something odd. The grass near my barn looked disturbed, like someone had been walking around. I went closer and found fresh footprints in the mud near the water spigot on the side of the building. Someone had been on my property. I checked the barn and found everything secure, nothing missing or disturbed. But the presence of those footprints unsettled me. I told Deborah to stay away, and someone had been here anyway. Saturday morning, I found out why. A county inspector's truck pulled into my driveway around 9 in the morning. A woman in her 40s got out, carrying a clipboard and a camera. "Roger Ingram," she asked. "That's me." "What's this about?" "I'm Sandra Chen from the County Building and Safety Department. We received a complaint about unpermitted structures and potential code violations on this property. I need to conduct an inspection." My stomach sank. "Who filed the complaint?" She glanced at her clipboard. "The complaint came from the Meadowbrook Springs HOA. They allege that your barn is unsafe, that you're keeping livestock without proper permits, and that there are potential environmental hazards. None of that is true." "That's what I'm here to determine, sir. May I proceed with the inspection?" I wanted to refuse, but I also knew that would only make things look worse. "Go ahead." Sandra spent the next hour walking around my property, taking photos and making notes. She inspected the barn, checked the chicken coop, looked at my septic system, and even examined the old well house near the back of the property. Finally, she came back to where I was waiting by my truck. "Mr. Ingram, I'm not finding any code violations. Your barn is structurally sound if old. Your chicken operation is well within the limits for residential agricultural use in this zoning district. Everything appears to be in order." So the complaint was baseless. It appears so. However, I do need to note something. She flipped through her notes. "Your property is zoned agricultural residential, which is actually a legacy zoning classification. The surrounding HOA development is zoned strictly residential. This means you have more rights to agricultural use than your neighbors do." I didn't know that. Most people don't pay attention to zoning until it becomes an issue. But in your case, it's actually protective. The county can't force you to stop keeping chickens or using your barn for agricultural purposes. It's part of your grandfathered rights. After she left, I called Mr. Fitzgerald and told him about the inspection. "They're trying to harass you through official channels," he said. "It's a common HOA tactic. File complaints with every government agency they can think of, hoping something will stick or that you'll get tired of dealing with it. What do I do? Document everything. Keep copies of the inspector's report showing no violations, and be prepared for more complaints. They're not going to give up easily." He was right. Over the next 2 weeks, I received visits from the health department investigating a complaint about my well water, the fire marshal responding to a report of fire hazards in my barn, and even animal control checking on allegations of livestock mistreatment. Every inspection came back clean. Every complaint was dismissed, but each visit ate up hours of my time and added to my stress. I was constantly on edge, waiting for the next knock on my door. The turning point came in late October. I was in town getting supplies when I ran into Dale Patterson, the HOA board member who'd confronted me earlier. He was loading mulch bags into his truck at the garden center. "Roger," he said with a nod that wasn't quite friendly but wasn't hostile either. "Dale." He loaded another bag, then turned to face me directly. "Look, I wanted to apologize for how I acted before. I was out of line. I wasn't expecting that." "Okay. Deborah's got the whole board worked up about your property. She's convinced that if we can just get you to join the HOA, it'll somehow validate our authority over the whole area." He shook his head. "Personally, I think she's obsessed. Your property doesn't affect my home value. You're not hurting anyone. Tell that to her." I tried. So did 2 other board members. She won't listen. She's been president for 3 years and the power's gone to her head. He lowered his voice. "Between you and me, several of us are planning to vote her out at the annual meeting in January, but until then, watch yourself. She's not done trying to make your life difficult. What else can she do? Every inspection has come back clean. I don't know, but Deborah always has another angle. Just be careful." He drove off, leaving me standing in the parking lot with a renewed sense of unease. If even the HOA board members thought she was going too far, what did that mean for me? I found out the following week. I came home from a dental appointment to find a large moving truck parked in my driveway. 2 men were loading something from my barn onto the truck. I parked my vehicle quickly and ran over. "What are you doing?" One of the men, a burly guy with a beard, looked at me in confusion. "We're picking up the mulcher. We got a work order from the HOA. The mulcher isn't here anymore. They took it weeks ago." "Well, someone said it was here and we're supposed to move it to their storage facility across town." I walked into the barn with them. Sure enough, the mulcher was back, sitting exactly where it had been before, as if it had never left. "I didn't authorize this to be here," I said, feeling my anger rise. "Look, man, we just do what we're told. The HOA paid us to move it. Fine, move it, but this is the last time anyone from the HOA sets foot on my property." After they left, I checked the barn thoroughly. Nothing else seemed disturbed, but the fact that someone had returned the mulcher without my knowledge or permission was deeply troubling. They'd been on my property, accessed my barn, and moved heavy equipment around, all without asking. I called Mr. Fitzgerald immediately. "This is escalating into potential criminal behavior," he said after I explained. "They're trespassing, and they've now done it multiple times. I think it's time to get the sheriff's department involved. I don't want to make this into a bigger thing than it needs to be." "Roger, they're already making it a big thing. You need to protect yourself and your property. File a report, create an official record. If this continues, you'll want that documentation." He was right, of course. That afternoon, I drove to the Fayette County Sheriff's Office and filed a trespassing complaint. The deputy who took my report was sympathetic but realistic. "HOA disputes are tricky," he said. "They'll probably claim they had implied permission because you let them store equipment before. But I'll make sure a deputy drives by your property more regularly, and we'll have this on record if it happens again." November brought colder weather and more problems. Someone filed a complaint with the county about my driveway being unpaved, claiming it was creating dust pollution. Someone else reported that my chickens were too loud, despite the fact that I only had hens and no rooster, so they barely made any noise at all. Each complaint was investigated and dismissed, but the harassment was taking its toll. I wasn't sleeping well. I was constantly worried about what would happen next. My peaceful rural property had become a source of stress and anxiety. Then, in mid-November, things got serious. I woke up one morning to find my barn door open and the interior trashed. Feed bags had been torn open and scattered everywhere. Tools were thrown across the floor. My tractor had a flat tire that looked like it had been deliberately punctured. This wasn't just trespassing anymore. This was vandalism. I called the sheriff's department immediately. This time, they sent out an investigator who spent 2 hours documenting everything, taking photos and collecting evidence. You have any security cameras? Detective Martinez asked. No, I never thought I'd need them way out here. I'd suggest getting some. This kind of escalating behavior often continues until we can catch someone in the act. She closed her notebook. You said you're having disputes with the local HOA. I explained the whole situation, from the Mulcher storage to the constant complaints and inspections. She listened carefully, her expression growing more serious. Mr. Ingram, I'm going to be straight with you. HOA disputes can get ugly. I've seen cases where things escalated to property damage, threats, even violence. The fact that someone came onto your property and did this level of damage is concerning. Do you think it was someone from the HOA? I can't say without evidence, but the timing and circumstances are suspicious. I'll include all of this in my report, and I'll personally speak with the HOA leadership. Sometimes an official visit from law enforcement is enough to make people think twice about their actions. After she left, I spent the rest of the day cleaning up the mess and repairing what I could. The flat tire on my tractor was the worst damage, requiring me to call a service to come out and replace it. The whole incident cost me a full day of work and several $100s. That evening, Detective Martinez called me. I visited the HOA office and spoke with Deborah Montgomery, she said. She denied any knowledge of the vandalism and seemed genuinely shocked when I told her about it. Did you believe her? Hard to say. She's either a good actress or she really didn't know. However, I also spoke with some of the other board members, and they mentioned that Mrs. Montgomery has been very focused on your property lately. One of them even suggested she might have hired someone to pressure you, though they had no proof. Hired someone. It happens more than you'd think. Some HOA presidents get so fixated on compliance that they start taking extreme measures. I've warned Mrs. Montgomery that any further incidents will result in a thorough investigation of the entire HOA board, and that legal action could follow. Hopefully, that will be enough to stop this. But it wasn't. 3 days later, I came home to find my mailbox bashed in and lying on the ground. Someone had driven over it, leaving tire tracks in the mud nearby. The mailbox was a solid metal one that had been there for decades, and it would have taken deliberate effort to knock it down. 2 days after that, someone cut my fence line along the back of the property, and 5 of my chickens escaped. I only managed to round up 3 of them. I installed security cameras, 4 of them, covering the driveway, the barn, the house, and the back property line. They were motion activated and connected to my phone, alerting me whenever someone approached. The first night after installation, I got an alert at 2 in the morning. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed to see a dark SUV slowly driving past my property, headlights off. It passed by twice, then drove away. The next night, the same thing happened. This time, I managed to get a partial plate number from the camera footage. I sent the footage to Detective Martinez the following morning. She called me back within hours. That vehicle is registered to someone who lives in the Meadowbrook Springs development, she said. I'm going to pay them a visit and find out why they're cruising past your property in the middle of the night. Do you think they're planning something? I think they're trying to intimidate you. But now we have evidence. This is stalking behavior and it's illegal. A week before Thanksgiving, everything came to a head. I received a certified letter from a law firm representing the Meadowbrook Springs HOA. The letter claimed that my property was creating a public nuisance, that my agricultural activities were inappropriate for the neighborhood character, and that the HOA was prepared to file a lawsuit seeking an injunction to force me to cease operations. I immediately sent the letter to Mr. Fitzgerald. He called me within the hour, and I could hear the anger in his voice. This is harassment, pure and simple. They have no legal grounds for any of this. I'm drafting a response that will make it very clear that any lawsuit they file will be immediately countered with a malicious prosecution claim and demands for damages. Will that stop them? It should. But I think it's time we went on the offensive. I want your permission to file a civil harassment suit against the HOA and Deborah Montgomery personally. We have documented trespassing, vandalism, stalking behavior, and now frivolous legal threats. A judge will see this for what it is. Do it. Mr. Fitzgerald filed the lawsuit the day before Thanksgiving. In it, we detailed every incident, included all the camera footage, attached copies of all the dismissed complaints, and documented the costs I'd incurred in dealing with the HOA's harassment. We sought damages for property destruction, emotional distress, and legal fees, plus an injunction prohibiting the HOA from any further contact with me or entry onto my property. The lawsuit hit the HOA like a bombshell. Deborah called me directly, something she hadn't done in weeks. "You're suing us. After we tried to work with you, you vandalized my property, filed false complaints, and threatened me with baseless legal action. That's not working with me, that's harassment." "I never vandalized anything. I would never do that." "Then who did?" "Who drove past my house at 2 in the morning? Who destroyed my barn? Who's been making my life hell for the past 3 months? I don't know." For the first time, she sounded uncertain, almost frightened. "The board is going to blame me for this. They're already talking about removing me as president." "You brought this on yourself, Deborah. You couldn't accept that my property isn't under your control, and you escalated things until they spiraled out of control." "I was just trying to protect property values." "That's my job as HOA president. Your job doesn't include harassment and intimidation. My lawyer has recommended that I also file a criminal complaint for stalking and vandalism. The only reason I haven't is because I want to give you one chance to make this right. What do you want?" "I want a formal written apology from the HOA. I want reimbursement for all my damages and legal fees. I want a permanent agreement that the HOA will never attempt to claim authority over my property or contact me for any reason. And I want you to resign as president." "I can't just resign." "Then I file the criminal complaint tomorrow, and we let the courts sort everything out. Your choice." She was silent for a long moment. "I'll talk to the board." The HOA's emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Dale Patterson called me Sunday evening. "The board wants to settle," he said. "Deborah's been outvoted. She's agreed to resign effective immediately, and the board has authorized payment of your damages and legal fees. They're also drawing up the permanent agreement you requested." "What about the vandalism? Who was responsible?" "That's complicated. We've been doing our own investigation. It turns out Deborah hired a private security company to monitor your property. She told them you were a problem resident who was harassing the HOA, and she wanted documentation of any code violations." "That doesn't explain the vandalism." "No, but it explains the surveillance. As for the vandalism, we think it was one of the security guards taking initiative. Deborah swears she never authorized it, and frankly, I believe her. She's controlling and obsessive, but I don't think she'd order someone to trash your barn." "Has the security company been contacted?" "Yes, and they're cooperating with the sheriff's investigation. They fired the guard who was assigned to your property. Turns out he has a history of aggressive behavior and was already on thin ice with the company." "I want his name." "Detective Martinez has all that information. The company is taking full responsibility, and they're prepared to pay additional damages to avoid a lawsuit." The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later. The HOA paid me $40,000 to cover damages, lost income, and legal fees. The security company paid an additional $20,000. I received a formal written apology from the HOA board, along with a legally binding agreement that they would never attempt to exert authority over my property. Deborah Montgomery resigned as president and moved out of the development within a month. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that her obsession with my property had caused major problems in her marriage, and her husband had insisted they relocate to a different area. The security guard who vandalized my barn was arrested and charged with criminal trespass and vandalism. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 months in jail plus restitution. Detective Martinez closed the case in early January. "You handled this well," she told me during her final visit. "A lot of people would have escalated things or responded with violence. You kept your head, documented everything, and let the system work. I just wanted to be left alone on my own property. And now you will be." The new HOA president reached out to me personally to assure me that the association wants no further contact with you. They've learned their lesson. Life slowly returned to normal. I repaired the damage to my barn and replaced the chickens I'd lost. The cameras stayed up, just in case, but they mostly captured footage of deer and the occasional raccoon. In March, I received an unexpected visitor. Dale Patterson knocked on my door on a sunny Saturday morning, looking somewhat sheepish. "I wanted to check in," he said. "See how you're doing." "I'm fine. Enjoying the peace and quiet." "Good. That's good." He shifted his weight. "I also wanted to say thank you." What happened with Deborah opened a lot of people's eyes in the HOA. We realized how out of control things had gotten, how much power we'd given to one person without oversight. We've completely restructured our board procedures and brought in a management company to handle day-to-day operations. I'm glad something positive came out of it. Your lawsuit and the bad publicity really shook up the community. In a good way, I think. People are more aware now of how HOAs can be abused. He glanced around at my property. And honestly, seeing your place now, I don't know why Deborah was so fixated on it. It's nice, peaceful, not hurting anyone. That's all I ever wanted people to understand. He left, and I stood in my driveway watching him drive away. The whole ordeal had been exhausting and expensive, even with the settlement money. But in the end, my property was protected, my rights were established, and the harassment had stopped. Spring turned to summer, and I focused on my land. I planted a garden, expanded the chicken coop, and even built a new storage shed for my equipment. The barn remained my favorite structure on the property, a connection to my family's history, and a reminder of what I'd fought to protect. In June, Mr. Fitzgerald called with interesting news. "You might want to see this," he said. "There's an article in the Lexington Herald-Leader about HOA reform legislation being introduced in the state legislature. Your case is specifically mentioned as an example of why the reforms are needed." I found the article online. It discussed how HOAs across Kentucky had been operating with minimal oversight, and how homeowners and adjacent property owners had few protections against harassment or overreach. My situation was cited as a cautionary tale, and several state representatives were quoted as saying new laws were needed to prevent similar cases. "You might have actually changed something," Mr. Fitzgerald said when I called him back. "Sometimes one person standing up makes a difference." I hadn't set out to make a difference or change any laws. I just wanted to protect my family's land. But if my experience helped prevent others from going through the same thing, then maybe all the stress and conflict had been worth it. The following autumn, exactly 1 year after the whole situation had started, I stood in my barn doorway watching the leaves fall from the old oak trees that bordered my property. The barn was mine, fully and completely. No HOA equipment stored in the corner. No unwanted visitors. Just my tools, my tractor, and the peaceful certainty of ownership. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. "Mr. Ingram, this is Patricia Hendricks, the new president of the Meadowbrook Springs HOA. I wanted to reach out personally to let you know that the association recently purchased a commercial leaf mulcher for the fall season. Unlike last year, we've arranged proper storage at a commercial facility and wanted to assure you that we will not be seeking to use your property for any purpose. We respect your boundaries and wish you well. Please accept this message as confirmation of our commitment to leaving you in peace." I read the message twice, then typed back a simple reply: "Thank you." That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. The chickens clucked softly in their coop, settling in for the night. In the distance, I could see the lights from the HOA development starting to glow as dusk fell. My property sat separate from all of it, independent and protected. The land my great-great-grandfather had claimed in 1854 remained in family hands, governed by the same deed and patent that had established it nearly 2 centuries ago. No HOA, no matter how powerful or persistent, could change that fundamental truth. I'd learned a lot over the past year. I'd learned that standing up for your rights often means enduring harassment and conflict. I'd learned that documentation and legal protection are essential when dealing with organizations that overreach their authority. I'd learned that even when you feel alone and overwhelmed, the law can still work in your favor if you're patient and persistent. Most importantly, I'd learned that some things are worth fighting for. My family's land, my independence, my right to live peacefully on my own property without interference, these weren't just abstract principles. They were the foundation of everything I valued. The Meadowbrook Springs HOA had tried to use my barn to store their leaf mulcher, assuming they had some right or authority over my property. They'd pushed and pushed, escalating from simple requests to harassment to vandalism. But when they finally saw my property deed, when they understood the legal and historical protection I had, everything changed. That deed, that simple piece of paper with its official seals and legal descriptions, represented something powerful: the unbreakable chain of ownership and rights that no HOA could override. It was my shield and my proof, the document that ended the conflict and established my independence beyond any doubt. As darkness fell completely and the stars began to appear, I went inside my house. The home my father had lived in, that his father had lived in, stretching back generations. Tomorrow I'd wake up and tend to my property, feed my chickens, work in my barn, and enjoy the peaceful rural life I'd inherited and fought to protect. The HOA drama was over. Life was good. And my barn was mine, fully and completely, just as it had always been and always would be.